All right. Looks like we are live, ladies and gentlemen. The State of the Union, the biggest announcement to hit since the big, beautiful bill. We are here with some industry icons, some very powerful people who know what's up and are here to share with us what just happened. I'm going to I'm going to introduce a few people right now. We've got Mark Bench, Val, and Abby Hopper. And Abby's part of SIA, Mark is TriSmart, and Val is Sun Solar Solutions out of Arizona. And if you don't know who these people are, they're huge solar advocates. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Solar Pro Facebook group. I'd like to take a second and really honor the previous admin of this group, a man by the name of Sonny Rock. He recently passed away, and he turned over the group to a couple people in the industry. And we just wanted to thank him for his years of engagement with the community, running such a powerful Facebook group. And we want to honor by hosting this tonight in his name. So thank you, Sonny, for your contribution to the solar industry. And we look forward to living on your legacy by sharing good, positive information tonight with the people who have it. So thank you all for tuning in. This is the State of the Union. And I've got a bunch of people here. And what I want to do is take a second and introduce Abby. Abby was one of the main people dealing with the government on what just happened this last weekend. So Abby, take a quick second, give people a high level on what just happened here in the solar industry these last couple days.
Sure. So first of all, Danny, thank you for inviting me, and Mark, thank you for inviting me. It's good to be with all of you this evening. I'm on East Coast time, so it's dark outside, but I'm always thinking about the sunshine. So I'm just going to take you back to January 1. We had a new president who ran on a goal to repeal the entire IRA. I know Mark lives in Texas. Texas was poised to sort of decimate the solar industry. So we started out the year in a pretty rough spot. And it's now July 7th. And we have gone through the Texas legislature. And I note that because it's our biggest market. And we now have a reconciliation bill. So over the last, I would say 6 weeks, it started in early May. We saw the first actual language coming out of Congress. It went through the House. It moved over to the Senate. I set my alarm every 30 minutes to watch the debate all night long, 2 nights in a row. But last Thursday, the Senate voted. The House voted on the language that the Senate passed. And then last Friday, the 4th of July, President Trump signed this bill. He calls it the Big Beautiful Bill. It's also known as H.R. 1. It's also known as the Reconciliation Bill. Washington is good at some things, but one of them is acronyms and different names for the exact same thing. So you hear people talking about reconciliation, you hear them talking about H.R. 1, and you hear them talking about the Big Beautiful Bill. They're all talking about the same thing. So now we have a new law, and I think that's what we're here to chat about tonight.
Yep, absolutely. And thanks for that high level. And we're going to go take a couple questions, Si. So if you're tuning in right now, throw some comments or questions in the comment section. We will be answering them towards the end. We put out a poll, and there's a couple really pressing questions that people are asking right now. And so the big ones we're going to lead in, and then we're going to kind of open the floor to Mark, Val, or Abby to jump in and answer this. But the big one that's on everybody's mind, the biggest adjustment that happened to the solar industry is what happened with the tax credits. So who'd feel comfortable or who'd like to share on their take on what just happened and why Mark is using motion sensor lights in his office? We're asking, what's going on in there for you to have motion sensor lights, Mark? That's out of the question here.
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
There we go. So who'd like to take this? What happened? Maybe Val, you jump on this one. What happened with the tax credit? We had it up until 2032 or 2030. Can't remember which one of them, but what just happened with that?
Yeah, Danny, and thanks so much for having me on. So two things. Obviously, there's two tax credits that apply to obviously us in the solar industry, right? There is the tax credit that homeowners get when they purchase solar, whether they do cash or financing. And then there's the tax credit that companies get, like LightReach, like Sunrun, et cetera, right? That they utilize. And so there's two different tax credits. And so they both changed in different ways. When it comes to homeowners that purchase solar, that tax credit ends on December 31st, 2025, right? So approximately 6 months from now, right? So after that point, right, a homeowner is not going to be able to get that 30% tax credit if they're purchasing a system. When it comes to leases and PPAs, that tax credit currently is due to expire on December 31st, 2027. There is a provision in there, there's something called safe harboring, which we'll maybe dive a little bit more into, but where potentially it could go all the way to about mid-2030. That one is it's still kind of a little bit up in the air because some rule changes could happen, but guaranteed, if you will, end of 2027 for leases and PPAs, end of this year for purchases.
Got it. So a big kick to the loan industry, or to the loan tax credit. Mark, what's your take on that? Val kind of hit on the head, but how are you feeling about that? What would you say?
Yeah, Val did nail it on the head, and thanks for the invitation as well, Danny. I think, look, our current administration's making it really clear where they stand with our industry. Abby can talk about this. Her team is on top of the executive order that also was signed today. That's like an open attack on our industry. Like they want to change the way certain things are defined. So Abby will talk about that, I'm sure. But I think, look, the longevity of our industry, we definitely took a hit. But those who have been selling third-party owned system, financing options like PPAs and leases, they are positioned to continue on. So that does give me hope. I think you're going to start seeing a lot of unique financing mechanisms come to play in the loan sector and also the PPA and lease sector. So look, I think that the industry has got to continue to get creative. And we need to make sure we're interpreting these rules appropriately before we strategize, instead of just listening to your neighbor. You really need to take it to the professionals, right? And figure out, okay, what does this actually mean? And get some legal advice there. Because I'd hate to see some of our critical stakeholders in our industry make decisions based on false precedents, like they don't actually understand what they're doing. So things like this are extremely important. As more things change, just be on the lookout for, SIA, RSA, and other industry leaders are going to be giving that information out to ensure that everyone's making the most appropriate decisions.
Absolutely. And then Abby, your take on what just happened with the loans.
Yeah. So what just happened with the loans, Val is exactly right. It says that expenditures have to be made by December 31, 2025. So your next question is going to be, okay, Abby, what's an expenditure, right? That's a specific term in the law now. An expenditure is actually a different way of describing it than it's been before. So as Mark was just saying, I've already heard different interpretations out there sort of in the stratosphere about, does that mean that your customer has paid you? Does that mean that your customer has paid you and you've built it? Does that mean your customer's paid you, you've built it, and it's interconnected? And you're going to get different answers because it's been, 72 hours since the bill passed and people are moving quickly. I can tell you that my tax attorneys at SIA are advising our members that at the very least, it means that your customer has paid and it is built. The solar project is built. So whether it is interconnected or not, I think is still an unknown. We're doing more intel gathering around that, but that's, I would say, as Mark said, like issue number one that I've heard already different interpretations of. And as Mark suggested, business owners should figure out what their risk tolerance is, but have good information upon which to evaluate that risk tolerance.
Got it.
And just to chime in there, and Abby, this is probably a request from the industry. We're going to have a lot of people want more refined guidance there. Mm-hmm. For example, there's a loan that I've signed up for 25 years and I'm beyond my cancellation term. Does that count? And to all those that want to know the answer to that question, that's to be determined. We're going to seek legal guidance, and we recommend you do as well. But we know that that is one of the most important questions, because everyone wants to know, well, how long do I have to sell these, get them installed, to ensure that my customers get the tax credit? So be on the lookout for those answers, but just know that SIA, RSA, and other industry leaders are going to be working until we have those answers, and we'll obviously share what we have. And of course, you can do your own and share back, right?
Absolutely.
Hey, Mark, I'll add on there real quick. One thing that we had talked a little bit about before is one of the things that I think we should, as an industry, expect is these loan companies, we may have until the end of the year, right, to install these systems and have them count on the purchase side for that tax credit for homeowners. And some of these markets, you might be able to sell something today and install it 4 days later, right? But the thing to keep in mind that we have already started hearing about is the loan companies are likely to sunset their programs or stop accepting loans probably much sooner, because they don't necessarily do it by market. They kind of do an overall, right, for the entire country. And so I would say would be a reasonable expectation that these loan companies are going to stop accepting loans under the current programs, which is obviously, we all know you get the 30% tax credit. You've got 16 or 18 months to pay that down, right? Again, this isn't anything that's come from them. It's just kind of my personal opinion on it. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if it's priced sometime in September, for example, maybe mid-October, right? To give it about 2.5 to 3 months for that system to get installed, that you may not have a loan option for that particular program. And we'll talk more about what happens post-tax credit, right? Because solar is not dying, right? But to be able to sell them a loan with that program where it's $150 for the first 18 months, and then you apply a tax credit, I would not expect to have that until the end of the year.
Got it. Great input, Val. So everyone that's watching, we will answer. We had a couple people ask about the executive order that was sent out today. Abby, it's my understanding you have been pretty up to tune with what that is, correct?
Yep.
Okay, good. We'll get to that in a second. We've got a few more of these preloaded questions that we're going to ask before we start going into it. If you guys are tuning in right now, this is a town hall meeting. The big, beautiful bill, it just got passed. What does it mean? We're getting clarity behind it. So we're here showing you the latest of what has been approved and what we need to know going forward into the industry. We have a couple of very fantastic people here that are joining us. So if you guys are tuning in right now, throw your comments in the comment section or questions you have for the group, and we'll answer them according to first come, first serve. Second big thing we're asking is now, what is the rules on PPAs and leases? I know Val, you touched on it, but Abby, I'd like to hear from you is what's the overall deal with leases and PPAs? How long do we have to sell them? Yada, yada, yada.
Yep. So it gets a little bit more complicated than just the financing, the loans, because loans have one date, done, December 31, 2025. When you get into leases and PPAs, it's a bit more nuanced. So bear with me for a second. It's July 7th, 2025. So you have from now until July 4 of 2026 to begin construction under a lease or PPA. If you do that, you will be entitled to a 30% tax credit, and you will fall under the safe harbor that Val was talking about. There's currently regulations that the Department of Treasury issued all the way back in 2013 that said if you meet these safe harbor provisions, you have 4 years to finish your project. So conceivably, you could start January 1, 2026, and you would have 4 years from that date to finish. Just put an asterisk there because you're going to ask me about the EO later. But under current regulations, as we sit here today, if you do not start construction before July 4th of 2026, but you do it July 5th of 2026, you then must have your project placed in service by December 31 of 2027. So there's sort of two timelines to think about: a year following enactment of the bill, and then between that time and December 31 of 2027. Hopefully that makes it as clear as possible.
Got it. Mark.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Yeah. And what Abby just said is really important. So, for a lot of the large third-party owned providers like Goodleap, LightReach, Enfin, Everbright, at Sunrun, they're all capitalized, and they are taking They are strategically aligning themselves with safe harbor provisions such that they can continue to offer PPAs and leases to all of us. So you can thank them for having the capital and the teams necessary to do that. It's not easy. It's not always simple, especially when you get executive orders like the one we did today that want to challenge what it means to safe harbor particular projects. Because currently there is a way today for companies like those that I mentioned to basically protect tax credits for a while, right? Even in the residential sector, prior to actually selecting the project, right? There's ways to do that. So if those challenges come to fruition and the executive order does put a stop to that, or at least disrupt capital markets, that is a challenge that our industry must deal with. But the second thing that Abby said that gives, me a lot of, I guess, faith and hope in the industry going forward is that we still have until 2027 to put these projects in service, regardless of safe harbor provisions or not, right? So that's good. The other thing that has also been brought up is batteries. The good news is a battery-only option through a lease or even a PPA will carry through all the way into the early 2030s. So battery technology is here. It's here to stay. So if you're not attaching batteries, please do. If you don't have a great battery offering yet, start reaching out to people. Storage solutions will continue to be a critical component to our industry. So, those kind of operate in their own journey, if you will, through all the new updates that have happened. So that's it for me.
Yeah. Danny, if I can give two thoughts on because I know people have asked me, and there might be a question about, just more from like a basic level on the safe harboring, right? Because obviously if you safe harbor by July 4th of next year, right? Which means safe harboring is, commencing construction, and people are like, well, how do I start? From a sales standpoint, it might be like, so I have to sell the customer by that date, and then I have 4 years to complete them. That's crazy, right? That's not realistic. But at least the old definition, which maybe, there's an update from the executive order that came out today, was you essentially either have to actually start construction, physical construction in a meaningful sense, right? So you're actually out there and you're installing stuff and you're digging trenches and putting stuff up on the roof, or you have to spend at least 5%, right, of the system cost by that date, and that qualifies as commencing construction. So from a practical standpoint, what that actually means is that, these third-party companies could, for example, buy the equipment, right, ahead of time. And now they've got a runway there of, like, let's say they buy enough equipment for 100,000 projects, which is a little odd to me. And I don't know exactly the mechanics behind it, but apparently that's how it works. Apparently you can buy equipment for a project that's not already sold, right? Because you've already incurred that expense, even though a customer hasn't necessarily been assigned to that equipment, it still counts. And so that's a bit of the strategy of how this can potentially stretch out to mid-2030, which is about 5 years from now. But again, I think that's a little bit of to be seen with some of the executive orders that, they might be trying to change some of those established rules. So maybe Abby can give a little bit of light on that.
Yeah. So I will do that because there's lots of stuff, and I just want to be clear about the executive order. So it came out at literally about 3 hours ago.
Everyone in the comments right now is asking about it. So
okay. Yeah, I can't see the comments. So what happened? So let me just tell you the politics for a minute. For those of you that were watching sort of the back and forth closely, you know that the House Freedom Caucus was very resistant to passing the bill that came out of the Senate. They thought that it did not cut the deficit nearly enough, and they were very angry about the provisions that the Senate had restored in the clean energy side of the House. And so there was lots of negotiation happening in President Trump's office, and lots of negotiation happening in the cloakroom in the House. And what we heard, there was press that promises were made to the Freedom Caucus that the administration would tighten down on the wind and solar industry, and that they should go ahead and vote for the bill. So they voted for the bill on Thursday afternoon. And then about, as I said, at 6 o'clock tonight, Eastern time, the president upheld his end of the bargain and issued an executive order that specifically called on the Department of Treasury, that's the department that does all the rules around the tax credits, and said, you have 45 days, Department of Treasury, and I want you to take a very careful look at the rules regarding wind and solar projects. And specifically, President Trump, want you to end the market distortion, sort of end these subsidies as much as you can, and called out the commenced construction in particular and the safe harbor. So the safe harbor, like the 5% test and the continuous work test and the 4 years, those are all regulatory constructs. They're not in legislation anywhere. It's something the Department of Treasury did, as I said, in 2013. So the Department of Treasury can change them. They're supposed to go through a rulemaking process, and you can imagine there's a lot of administrative law requirements around that. But so the president sort of put it on fast forward and said, hey, in 45 days, I want you to come back and tell me how you're going to solve these things. So I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. Anyone who tells you they know what's going to happen isn't telling you the truth. They might be making very good predictions, but they really don't know what's going to happen. What's in the realm of what could happen is they certainly could reduce the number of years, right? Like instead of 4 years to finish a project, they could say no years. They could say 2 years. I think they could also change what counts as safe harbor. So now it's 5%. It could be 50%. Now it's continuous work, and it means, as you said, digging trenches or whatever. They may change what it means to have continuous work. I think the bigger thing is you think about the timeline. It's really only between now and in a year, right? Like I get my timeline. There's so many timelines moving at the same time, but yeah, it's 1 year, right? 1 year is
July 4th, 2026.
Yeah.
Is like the date, the D-Day for safe harbor.
Right. And so like 45 days from today, I believe is August 18th. So it's really the time between August 18th and July 4th. Well, that's not really enough time kind of in the normal course to do a rulemaking. Like that is like a rulemaking on speed. And so there's some anxiety, some worry that they'll kind of skip some of these processes. So more to come on that. That is about as clear as one could make it, I think. A lot of unknowns, but that's sort of again, I feel like a large part of my job is to explain the risk, and then your job as entrepreneurs is to figure out your risk tolerance. But that is a pretty significant risk that got introduced in the last couple of hours.
And Abby, a follow-up question I'll have to that is if the definitions are changed by the Department of Treasury, are they usually on a go-forward basis?
They're usually on a go-forward basis. They're usually prospective changes only. But that is an area of risk. And I think that there's a lot of lawyers in Washington tonight about sort of what the legal precedent is in terms of retroactive changes.
Got it. So guys, if you're tuning in right now, State of the Union, what's going on? Solar Pros Facebook group. A lot of stuff's happened the last couple days. So if you're tuning in right now, you're part of the good guys. You want to know what's happening, how to do it right, because the people that don't want to do it right aren't paying attention. So congratulations on being here on a Monday evening, for tuning in. We've gotten a remarkable group of individuals here today sharing with us what just passed. So if you're tuning in right now, Val, on a high level, why don't you just summarize what just happened with loans, leases, and batteries for everybody watching, high level, just a keynote of what just happened, what got passed for the guys that are just checking in right now.
Sounds good, Danny. Yeah, so high level, there was a new bill signed Friday last week, okay? The bill makes changes to the tax credit for homeowners buying solar, as well as for corporations that take the tax credit, right? Like your third-party owned companies for leases and PPAs. When it comes to homeowners, basically it ends on December 31st, 2025, so end of this year in about 6 months, right? So anybody buying solar, whether buying cash or loan, you're not going to be able to get that tax credit after this year. Okay. When it comes to leases and PPAs or TPO, third-party ownership, corporations, such as a Lightreach, such as an Enfin, Goodleap, Sunrun, right, that take this tax credit, they are able to take that tax credit for all systems that are placed in service or PTO'd by the end of 2027, so December 31st, 2027. And so what that basically means, and that doesn't mean obviously it's not like purchases aren't banned. People can still buy solar right after the 31st. They just won't get the tax credit, right? And so, and then obviously leases and PPAs, nothing changes there until that point. And as Abby was just saying, there may or may not be some safe harboring stuff, depending how that shakes up. That may give us some additional years on top of that. But right now, essentially, you can bank on, or it's guaranteed that you'll have it at least through the end of 2027 for leases and PPAs. When it comes to batteries, and I have seen a lot of stuff online, some confusion on this. Batteries themselves on purchases, it's the exact same time frame as it is for solar, right? So they're under 25D, which is the tax code that governs the tax credit on purchases. Those also end at the end of this year. When it comes to leases or PPAs, they're actually a little bit of a different timeline that's actually a bit longer. So all of these changes for leases and PPAs do not apply to batteries. They're under the original time frame, which I think is still till like 2032. You continue getting 30% on batteries that are leased or there's a PPA on all the way till 2032. And then it actually steps down per the original timeline, which is, I think, it goes down to whatever the math was, right? It goes from 30 to something, and then it ends in 2034. Okay, that's when it completely goes away. So batteries, there's going to be a lot of batteries going on. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of leases and PPAs, but if those do end up sunsetting as expected, then, there's going to be a lot of batteries being sold or leased under that for, another 9 years, essentially.
Love it. Val, thank you for summarizing that. Guys, if you're tuning in, throw some love in the comments. Thank these guys for showing up. We're going to be going through a couple of the questions that you guys have asked. So if you're watching this right now, thank you for tuning in. We're trying to give you the nuts and bolts of exactly what's going on in the space. So thank you guys all for tuning in. So one of the first couple of questions, we handled the executive order. Mark, in your own words, are you familiar with that? The executive order that just passed?
Briefly, yeah.
Okay. Would Abby be better just to address
Abby's
that?
going to be your expert on the executive order. I would defer to her.
Okay. Abby, high level, real quick. Executive order, it's around safe harboring, correct?
Yep.
All the people who don't know what safe harboring is, because I know what it is, but the people who don't know, what would you tell them what that is?
Sure. So when you safe harbor a project, it means that you have met certain tests that give you extra time to finish your project. So what the regulations currently allow, and they allow it, is if you spend 5% of the capital of the project, if you spend that much money on equipment, or if you begin substantive work, and continue working, you've started the clock so that you kind of cement the start date, cement the day that, how much your tax credit is worth. And then you have currently 4 years to finish that project. Sometimes it's called safe harbor. Sometimes you hear it called commence construction guidelines. We like to use different terms for the same thing. The executive order that was issued just a couple hours ago asked the Department of Treasury to take a look at those, but what specifically calling out wind and solar, and in particular, for the fact that we disrupt the market and that, we are taking advantage of taxpayers. So we anticipate a different interpretation of that, what is safe harbor and how much time you might have to finish your project.